Hey, hello, this is Dr. Daniel Bai with CloseForChiro, showing all of you how to get the yes with less stress. And I totally appreciate you hanging out with me today. And special props to the International Virtual Chiropractic Congress that's been organized in Brazil by Chiropractic Without Borders. And it is a pleasure and an honor to be here with you all today. What I'm going to be speaking about today single-handedly has shifted the chiropractic practices, businesses, and the lives of those practitioners literally overnight. Very few things that exist in our profession and in our lives that have such a huge impact with one little shift in how we do things and how we think about things. And one of the things that I have embarked on since the beginning of my career is rebranding this thing called sales. Now, I know what y'all are thinking is, when you talk about selling and sales, it automatically gives this notion of something negative, that you're tricking someone into buying something that they truly don't want or need or truly can't afford. That selling means that we're manipulating someone to do something that they truly don't want to do. That's something that's bad for them, right? Because in the press, in normal conversation, like no one really wants to be considered a salesperson, or no one wants to really admit to themselves that they are indeed selling something. Now, I got to let you all know that denial is one of the main driving forces on why so many chiropractic practices worldwide struggle. Because if you're like me, we understand this concept that these contradictions create destruction. I learned that from Patrick Gentempo many moons ago, and I didn't really understand it then. But now that I look back to it, the very fact that if we're in chiropractic practice, our job is to sell, because they buy, we provide a service and they buy, so indeed we're selling. But we show up to our offices every single day and say to ourselves, we don't sell, we don't do sales. At any permutation of that, that immediately starts a contradicting mentality that many of you are probably struggling with right now. So, what I want to do today is I want to set the record straight for once. And there's a lot at stake here because our profession is so desperate to reach the masses, so desperate to get our message out there, because I don't care what anyone says. Chiropractic is indeed the best healthcare product in the world. I don't care what anyone says. That is the truth. Yet, the people around the world are consuming chiropractic at single-digit % market share. Like, very few people, okay? Compared to all the other negative stuff that people are buying day in and day out that are literally killing them. So we got to figure this out. So today we're going to be talking about that. So the number one thing is definitions. See, sales is not something that's negative. It's a matter of fact. It's actually a subject of study in many high-ranking, very prestigious universities and college all across the globe, and they study this as an academic pursuit. This is a subject matter for a lot of these people. So that's number one. Number two, sales is literally a bridge between a problem and a solution, and sales is what connects the two. Today, we're going to be talking about a lot of the reasons why chiropractors can't sell anything. And if you think you're selling something, let's be completely honest here. You're not selling enough. One of the things I learned way back in the day, and this is from a business coach and a business mentor called Brian Tracy, I don't know, maybe 20, 30 years ago, is that, most businesses don't go out of business because they suck. They go out of business because they cannot sell their thing enough times in the shortest amount of time. So because many of you probably see enough new patients. New patients are coming in. And I'll get into new patients later because there's a whole nother issue with our brain regarding new patients. But let's say many of you are seeing new patients 10, 15, 20 a month, whatever that is, right? So the new patients come in and you seem like you're happy because new patients are coming. What usually happens is, if you believe that this person needs to be under care for 12 visits, 24 visits, and 36 visits, right? And then come to find out, at the end of the day, you've only recommended 7, 8, 9, 10, 12 visits. Again, another contradiction. Why would you recommend something that that person truly doesn't need? I'll tell you why. You're scared. You're scared to confront this person, to commit to spending 3 months with you, if that's your care plan. Spend whatever amount of money that costs, because you're afraid to confront that. In actuality, you're afraid to get rejected. You get rejected too many times. I understand. You get very, very trigger shy. You don't want to take a risk. You want to make everyone happy. You don't want to ruffle any feathers. You're afraid that they're going to keep saying no and talk bad about you in the community. And I want to let you know, all of those concerns and fears are completely unfounded. That's not actually what happens. Let me ask you all a question. If you went to buy something, let's say a car or some landscaping or random whatever, and you didn't buy it, do you truly come back and say, I hate that place, I never want to see that place again, they're the devil, they suck, they're horrible? No. If you didn't buy it, you're just like, I didn't buy it. It wasn't a big deal. Fine. You move on with your life. That's the worst thing that can happen if people say no. And many of you think that no goes way beyond just okay, I just didn't buy it. You think they're going to, it's a reflection on your personality. It's a reflection on your character. No, if people don't buy from you, it's a reflection of your skill, because sales and closing is a skill. Sales is a thing. It is something that you need to study. It took me 10, 12 years to figure that out, because back in the day, if it wasn't for me understanding and understanding that sales is a thing, I would have probably gotten out of the profession. It's not what I want for y'all. Your job is to provide quality care, but the only way to do that is to get enough of them to start. So let me give you a case study. Let me give you an example. A chiropractor somewhere around the world is seeing 20 new patients a month. Now, we all know how much work it may take to get 20 new patients a month. This person's in practice for at least 2 years, seeing 20 new patients a month. This person is seeing barely 100 visits a week. They're making a little money, but it's certainly not bringing them any freedom. They're now a slave to their office. They're probably in their 30, 40, 50 hours a week, seeing less than 100 visits a week, seeing 20 new patients a month. Now, I'm going to pause here, and I want you to think about those numbers. And some of you are not numbers people, some of you are, but these are very easy numbers to imagine. 100 visits a week, 20 new patients a month. They've been seeing 20 new patients a month for about 2 years. They're still at 100 patients a week, 100 visits a week, and they're not making any money. What's the problem here? Well, I'll tell you one thing. The problem is that this person does not need more new patients. That's a fact. Number two is that out of the 20, how many of them are actually starting care? Very few. Many of you see plenty of new patients, but many of you, we don't know how to sell chiropractic to its fullest for them to actually do the work in your offices, and they keep returning so that they can consume chiropractic at the wellness or maintenance level, which is what I know every one of you want for your patients. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to go over some do's and don'ts. And by the time we're done here, I want to make sure that you all leave with specific action steps that you all can take care of and do in your offices that will immediately increase the impact that you have with your patients and get more yeses, get less nos, get people to actually accept your best recommendations over and over and over again. Okay, so here's number one. We have to understand what people truly, truly care about. Now, this is a big challenge for most chiropractors because I all know you care about chiropractic. I love chiropractic too, okay? I know you want to make sure that people understand that the body that made the body heals the body. I know you all want to make people understand that if people are under criticism of chiropractic care, it will optimize the nervous system. It will be able to improve their immune system, improve their function, have a happier life, be able to do things that they want to do. Like, these are the things that we know chiropractic can provide. Here's the problem, though. Most, if not all, of the patients that come into your particular office come in saying that I want those things. What they really are saying when they get into your office is, Doc, I have a problem and I need a solution. That's number one. Your patients have a problem. You are a solution. They're not looking for a completely new way of thinking about something. They don't need a new religion. They don't need a new philosophy. Okay? At least not yet. What they would need is a solution to a problem. So what are these problems? I know you know, because patients come in with problems. They say, Doc, my neck hurts. That's a problem. And so many of you chiropractors out there dismiss the problem because it's not big enough. Chiropractic is so big and so great, and neck pain is so small. It's not worth my time. It's too unimportant. You're not the only person guilty of this, folks. So many other chiropractors that we have trained over the last 12 years have started here. And I get it. You want to be more than a back pain doctor. I understand. But for us to be more than just back pain, neck pain, whatever, we have to first acknowledge that the people that are using our services, that we have to acknowledge that they have a problem, and we have to initially be a solution to that problem. Otherwise, they will never have a chance at fully experiencing what chiropractic truly can be in the future. So what usually happens is a person comes in, and we'll talk about how great chiropractic is, how great you are, how great your facility is, how great your staff is. Look at my beautiful office. Look at these pictures. Look at these testimonials. Look at the paint color. Look at the beautiful ceiling. Look at the lighting. You talk about how everything is so great in your office before your patients even has a chance to open their mouth. What does a patient care about? They care about themselves, rightfully so. Is that too much to understand? I don't think so, because many of you have gone to other places, other businesses, other service providers, and asked for help. And if you were desperate for a solution to a problem, and you went somewhere for a solution to the problem, and they sat you down and they gave you a philosophical talk on why their stuff is so good, would you buy? Would you hang out there? No, you'd be out. See, many of your patients start off knowing that you could be a solution to their problem. And because we don't know how to sell chiropractic, slowly but surely they start losing faith in you as a solution to the problem. And the only reason they hang out for a couple of visits is because they want to be nice. They don't want to confront you to tell you that, you know what, you're not really what I was looking for. And they go. Now check this out, docs. You get to understand something. I know that we don't want most of our patients to get into the cycle of bad medicine, where they go and take pills and drugs and surgery. You see, we can't get mad at medicine for that, because you know what? If we don't close them in our offices and they don't buy chiropractic and they don't see you as a solution to the problem, they're going to go somewhere else, right? And they're probably going to go down a route that you know that you don't want them to go. Drugs, medicine, surgery, right? So it is your duty and your obligation to sell, push, and close chiropractic ethically, in the real way things should be sold, with truth, transparency, and ethics. I know this should just happen. People should sell things ethically, but unfortunately, either because they are trying to trick people, which is I don't think happens a lot, but more importantly, if you don't know what you're doing, it certainly looks like you're trying to pull something. And if you don't know what you're doing, it certainly looks like you're trying to get them to do something that they truly don't want. And that is a problem. And that's a problem that we need to fix, like yesterday. So, actionable step number 1. When a patient comes into the office, nothing is more important to you than sitting them down and starting the consultation. No more office tours, no more look at my fancy office, no more look at my smart staff. No, it's a one-on-one. It's a knee-to-knee. It's me and you. Let's talk. Here's the next thing. Once you get in front of them, we need to have a sequence. We need a plan here. And so many of you go into the day 1, day 2, or when you first meet a patient without a plan. Now think about this for a second. even okay, so even some of you, okay, I can only speak for the men. When if you're male, if you're a fellow man and you were trying to get a date with a woman, right? Let's say your current wives or what have you, and you're at a party. I don't know about you, but if you really wanted to talk to that girl, for me, I needed a plan, something. I wasn't just going to go up there and wing it and say, okay, let's just figure it out when I get there. If anything is really important, many of you formulate a plan to make sure that you have somewhat of a guide to get you from this point to this point. But when we go into with our new patients, we don't have a plan. And at CloseForChiro, we give you that plan, but more importantly, we need to make sure that we execute that plan. So here's a couple of planning mistakes that many of you make. Number one, as soon as a patient sits down, you don't matter. There's nothing about you that's interesting enough that they're going to want to listen to you right now. Remember, they're not at a party. They didn't come to your concert to watch you play piano. They didn't come to your house because they were interested in you. Remember, the perspective of who's in front of you. They came into your office because they want something from you. That's a huge distinction. What do they want? Oh, I already told you. They want a solution to their problem. So what's the most rational action step that we could start with? Ask him what the problem is. Hey, John, what brings you in? And then STFU. What that stands for is shut the fuck up. Don't say anything. Most of the time, you all kill the close because you just cannot keep your mouth shut. And we have to be quiet. And this is a communication skill that this is not new, right? If you're married, if your wife's mad at you, okay, or if your husband's mad at you or someone's mad at you, the worst thing you could do is not listen and keep talking. It's going to make things worse, right? What I do, my wife is mad at me all the time. So when she's mad at me, I know I better shut the fuck up. Stop talking. Why? Because it's only when that other person is done talking will you deserve and you earn the right to say what you have to say. Just think about that in just general terms with relationships you have outside of your patients. But why is it that when we get in front of our patients, all of those rules go out the window? It makes absolutely no sense. So, what brings you in, John, is the question. You could translate that in any language, it's the same. What brings you in? And then just zip it. Let them talk. Because if you let them talk long enough, two things happen. Number one, they feel like they got something off of their chest. Okay, psychologically, it's very, very therapeutic. And when they get something off their chest and they feel like they're listened to, guess what? Your level of authority, credibility, and empathy goes up. Great. That's 2 for 2. Last thing that happens, most importantly, they start to divulge what they truly, truly want. They start to divulge their real problem to you in the first 2 minutes of meeting you, as opposed to you doing all of these gymnastics and going left and right, up and down, and then you sit there after 15 minutes with your new patient thinking, why is this person here? Have you ever done that? I know I have. It's the most frustrating thing in the world. They've been with you for 20 minutes, but you don't even know what they want. You don't know what their problem is. You don't even know if you could help them. Man, we have to stop this, chiropractors. So what brings you in and STFU? That's a plan. Now, after they tell you what they truly want, now we can go somewhere. The day one, day two, a good, properly executed sales process has direction. It's like it's a river that follows a certain route. Occasionally, there's a problem, and we may get a little off track, but we're trying to follow the major current in this, ultimately getting to the other side. Because there's a goal here. Let me show you, make sure you don't forget the goal. The goal is to get that other person to say yes to chiropractic care, to say yes as you as a solution to that problem. That is the goal. So what do? We start this process by, number one, identifying the true problem. Now, here's the other challenge. Oh, God. If they give you a problem, you cannot judge it. if they come in and say, hey, doc, my shoulder hurts and I want to build the biggest ball of yarn in the world, you can't judge it. You have to support it. I might not agree with their goals, but I'm certainly going to support it. Who cares if they want to, I don't know, race cars or build big balls of yarn or whatever? Why does that matter to you? John, you want to build the biggest ball of yarn? Right on. Let's get you doing that. That has to be the most important thing for you. So you got the problem. Here's number 2 is, let's fast forward here. Let's fast forward to day 2 when finally you have to explain to them the recommendations and the cost for care. Let's assume by the end of your exam, your x-rays, your clinical data farming, you've done everything, and you know that this person needs, let's say, 3 times a week of care for 3 months. Let's just say for 36 visits. On day 1, do you understand? They need to understand that this problem requires that type of response. So let me give you an example. Someone comes in and says, doc, I have some type of lower back pain. And you ask them through a conversation, you know, how long has it been there? And they go, I woke up with it yesterday. Do y'all get that? Or I have a headache today. I know you can help me with headaches, but doc, I only get them like once a year. Or I just started last weekend. Good luck. Recommending a course of corrective care, right? Based off of the fact that this person thinks that this is a new problem. Do you get what I'm saying? So here's the truth of it. Most people who come to see you are not coming to you with a brand new problem, all right? What's most likely occurring is that they are coming to see you with an acute exacerbation of a chronic condition. This is a problem that they've had for many, many years, and it came and went. It got good, and it got worse. Finally, it was exacerbated, and it got worse. Finally, they make it to your office, but they don't remember all the other episodes prior to that point that precipitated to the point where it's bad today. They just think this is a new problem. So how do we get around that? Do we tell them, hey, hey, John, you know what? You're wrong. This is an acute exacerbation of a chronic condition. You've actually had this problem for 20 years. You're wrong. This is not a new problem. Do we go and do that? No, good luck with that, because they'll immediately turn off because you disagreed with them. You made them feel stupid. You did not protect their self-esteem, and they're gone. Do you understand? We can't do that. So we need a way, a very non-confrontational way to help this person understand that this problem is an acute exacerbation of a chronic condition, and this is what we do. So we ask the question like this. Let's assume you've asked the person, what brings you in, and they've divulged and they've spoken to you, and let's say it's a lower back pain, just for example. So before we do anything, what we need to do is what's called timelining them. So I would ask John, prior to 2 weeks ago, when you first started feeling this, when was the first time you recall ever having any type of lower back pain whatsoever? Let me repeat that. John, prior to a week ago, when was the first time you recall having any type of lower back pain whatsoever? Now, listen to the question. Say it to yourself, because what you're actually asking is, prior to when you told me it happened, and let's be honest, many of your patients say, oh, I woke up with it yesterday, or I got it last month, or I just had it for 2 days, or whatever. Think about it. You're asking them prior to that time, which again, you're agreeing with them, you're acknowledging that, prior to that 1 week ago, when was the first time they had any type of lower back pain whatsoever? This is the crazy thing about this, is because they're going to now go in their memory banks and think, when was the first time? Now, here's the thing, and this is a clinical consideration. When someone comes in with some type of problem, for example, in this example, it's lower back pain. See, the lower back pain may be very sharp and searing today, right? But you all know as doctors that that initial problem, probably a fifth lumbar subluxation, first started off many years ago as an occasional pulling or a tightness or a soreness, right? And as that subluxation complex gets worse and gets more degenerated and more fixated over the course of time, then it becomes sharp and stabbing. So the symptomatology can evolve over the course of a condition. We all agree with that. That's why this question is so brilliant, because we are covering all the angles in terms of we're asking clinically what's happened, but more importantly, we're getting the true time factor on when this problem first started. And oftentimes they'll reply like this. I'll say, prior to a month ago or prior to a week ago, John, when was the first time you recall ever having any type of lower back pain whatsoever? And then they'll say, oh, well, probably, I don't know. You know what? It was back when I graduated from college. They'll say something like that, and you'll reply with, when was that? How many years ago was that? And then they'll say, oh, that was 15 years ago. I got to tell you, docs, this happens so often, and it's a lost opportunity if we don't timeline them back. Prior to a week ago, when was the first time you recall ever having any type of lower back pain whatsoever? Now, I'm sharing this with you, and this comes right out of our Day 1, Day 2 masterclass. And I'm sharing this with you because this topic right here on timelining the problem to when it's first started is not a sales concept, although it helps you sell. It's a truth concept. And that is the biggest thing about sales, is that the only way that you can truly help someone with a solution to the problem is if you truly know what the problem is. And many of you are thinking, oh gosh, I want to help them, but they don't want the help. Wait a second. Let's rethink about this for a second. It's not that they don't want the help. It's that you could not position yourself as a true solution because you really didn't know what the true problem was, how long it was, what it felt like, how it affected their lives. And you may think you know, but if you don't follow the rules of sales, your patients will never open that up to you. Now, here's concept number 2. And this one drives a lot of doctors completely nuts and crazy, because a patient comes in, you're thinking, why wouldn't they tell me their problem? Why would they not share how long the problem's been there truly? Why wouldn't they tell me how it's affecting their life, right? And I got to tell you something, that is very arrogant, because you are humans too, and you have relationships. Do you tell all of your darkest and deepest secrets to everybody? No, you don't. Who do you tell these deepest and darkest secrets to? Who do you share those things with? That's right, only people that you trust. Does that make sense? And so asking the appropriate questions on a day 1 sets up the day 2. Here's another thing. It is not what you say at the end of a day 2 when you present your finances and your care plan that makes them say yes. You have to understand that. Everything is set up in the beginning. From the moment they enter the office to the time that you present your finances, that entire process is what engages a person to eventually say, yes, I want Dr. Gomez to be my chiropractor and I'm willing to pay for it. Does that make sense? Very, very critical. So here's another thing. Now, okay, so we covered one of the day 1 concepts that we teach in our course. And I'm just telling you, if you just put that into play immediately, it's so much easier to justify. And I'm not saying you justify. The patient self-justifies that I need to be committed to this doctor's recommendations, okay? And here's another question that you can ask on day 1, again, right out of our course. And I just realized that the only way we're going to move together as a community and as chiropractors is that we share this information. Now, I can't give you everything in 50 minutes, but I certainly can get you started. And the next question is, what have you done to get this problem corrected? Okay. We want to know what's the things that this patient has done in the past for this particular problem. Now, clinically, we want to know that information because we want to make sure, I don't know, some of you want to know, like, did they see a medical doctor? Did they get a massage? Did they get acupuncture? Like, we want to know that. But the bigger reason we ask that question is because we want to establish the frustration that the patient has been experiencing of trying all these things and nothing has gotten this thing corrected. Chiropractic is pretty interesting, folks, because it's not the first thing that people try, right? They've tried Advil and drugs. They went to their regular doctor or their real doctor. They've gotten, their cousin does something on them. And, chiropractic is never really the first thing they try. So when person comes into my office anyway, I just assume they've tried other things. So my question is, Mr. Patient, John, what are some things that you've done to get this problem corrected that hasn't corrected it yet? Again, John, what are some things that you've done to get this problem corrected that hasn't corrected it yet is the question. Then they're going to respond. I've tried the MD. I've tried vitamins. I've tried acupuncture. I've tried physical therapy, and they'll list that off. Then the response is, you've tried the MD, the DC, the PT, vitamins, but nothing you've done so far has actually gotten the problem corrected. Is that correct? And they'll say, yes. That's it. Now, if you wrote that down and you thought about what that question asked, it may not be very apparent to you, but I want to let you know the result. The assumption is that everything that they've done up until this point hasn't corrected it. That means that if they ever think about not getting chiropractic care and going back to the MD or going back to PT or going back to acupuncture, they're essentially saying, whatever that didn't work, I'm going to go back and try again. Does that make any sense? No, it doesn't. So on day 2, if they ever say something like, you know what, I just 3 times a week is too much. I don't have the time. I'm just going to go and take those vitamins. Well, John, you just told me yesterday that you've done that and it still hasn't gotten it corrected, right? He's like, yeah. So don't you agree that we have to do something different? John says, yeah, I agree. And you've saved it, as opposed to saying, oh, okay, well, you want to go take vitamins or you want to go back to the MD? Okay. And we let them go because we had no ammunition, nothing solid on a day 1 to help your patients make the right decision, because y'all know them going out of your office to the MD, the DC, the PT, the pills, the surgery is not the solution to the problem, right? We know that. So why would we let them go back there? Man, those are just 2 concepts on a day 1 that do incredible things to help people understand, hey, this doctor, is a solution to my problem. So do y'all now understand a little better why it's so easy or easier to get your patients to commit to care plans that are more than just a couple of visits? And I got to tell you something. I firmly believe, not only philosophically, but scientifically, that the patients that are under the care on average by the average chiropractor worldwide is underadjusted. It just has to be. The spine and nervous system being pretty much ignored for their entire lives until like 35, 40, until they have a crisis. Degeneration, arthritis, osteoporosis, fixation, subluxation, all these things have been cooking for 20, 30, 40 years, and they come in with a problem, and we're recommending 5 visits, or let's say you recommend more, but they're quitting after 5 visits when they're feeling better. That to me is a travesty. That to me is wrong. Yet, many of you that are watching this right now know that, and you feel that, but you just can't seem to get someone to understand that they need to be under care for more than a couple of visits. So what can we do to start recommending more, or recommending things that are actually accurate for the conditions and the long-standing problems that most of your patients come in with? Like, how do we do that? So, you know what? I'll tell you, so many people will just talk about how it's a headspace thing. Like, you got to believe, people need, let's say you're recommending 10 visits, but they really need 30. And most people will be like, oh, you just have to do it. Be brave. I don't know about you guys. That never worked for me. I needed something more than just belief, at least initially, to do things that were scary for me. And it was scary. Let's be completely honest here. I mean, you're putting yourself out there. You're taking a risk because all these bad things could happen if you're recommending too much. And in certain countries, in certain parts of the world, it's almost sometimes illegal to recommend too much based off of what the laws are. And it's so much going against us in chiropractic. But, we cannot run from the truth. If someone's been having a problem for 30 friggin' years, I mean, to ask someone to dedicate more than a couple of dozen visits, maybe 24 to 36 visits, and that's what they truly need, why aren't we recommending it, right? Again, it's scary. So I'm going to help you with some of these things. Now, recommending more care is definitely one. And then at the end, we'll also talk about finances, how to set up your finances so that it's not like pulling teeth. It's not a big deal. How to structure your finances and your payments. Should I do a prepay, a 3-pay? We'll go over that toward the end of today's talk. So care plans. Let's say you're someone who recommends just 10 visits, but they need more, let's say 20 or 30. One of the things that we need to distinguish is the difference between short-term pain relief and long-term correction, or short-term patch-up, long-term correction. We need to distinguish the difference between those two when we're talking about our recommendations. So one of the things that I will always say, and this is a verbal a script or verbal something that you say before you give them the recommendations, and you need to pre-frame it. We have to say something before we say, John, I'm going to see you 3 times a week for 3 months, or twice a week for 6 weeks, or whatever your recommendations are. We need to pre-frame before we do that. So this is what it sounds like. And I'm going to say it once, and I want you to say it in your head a couple times and try to make some sense out of it, and then we'll dive into why this works. So John, before I get into what we got to do to get this thing corrected, I want to let you know that my recommendations are based off of how to get this thing completely corrected, as opposed to making this feel better temporarily. From what you told me yesterday, you told me that you've tried the MD, you've tried the pills, you've tried the muscle relaxers, you've tried the acupuncture, but you've already told me that nothing you've done so far has actually gotten this problem corrected. Is that right? Yes, doctor. So that's why my recommendations for you today have to be different, because I do not want you to deal with this for the rest of your life, always finding another way to patch it up. Any questions on that? No, doc, not at all. I completely agree. Great. So, John, I'm going to see you 3 times a week for the next 3 months. Blah, 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 blah. And there's your recommendations. And that's what a pre-frame sounds like. So, in other words, before we drop the bomb, we need to help them manage their expectations on what's about to come. See, we do this without even thinking about it when we're communicating properly to other people, like your family. Let's say you're about to give one of your kids or your spouse some bad news. Let's say, you broke something in the house. I don't know, any example. You're not going to just come up to your spouse and say, hey, I broke the vase. I broke the vase. Too bad. No, you're going to pre-frame it. Hey, honey, do you know that vase in the corner that is on that weird table and it's almost like kind of off to the side? Yeah, what happened? Well, I broke it. See, there's a pre-frame to that. Or if you're giving someone some really important news, you don't just come out and say, hey, you won the lottery. No, you say, hey, do you remember you entered that contest a couple of weeks ago? And remember how important it was to make sure that you filled in all the boxes and you made sure that you submitted it properly? Do you remember that? Yeah. Well, you won. we pre-frame everything. So this is another example of pre-framing. John, before I get into my recommendations, I want to let you know my recommendations are based off of how to get this thing corrected, not just make you feel better temporarily. We're distinguishing the difference between a short-term care plan and a long-term corrective care plan. And the more concise and the more clear the difference is between the two, the better they're going to accept your recommendations. Does that make sense? So such a huge distinction. So again, I'll repeat this again. And yes, these are words, but for some of us, we don't prepare our words because we know what our patients are thinking. Oh my God, it's so long. But if we know that, why won't we prepare the proper things to say so they can accept it better? John, before I give you my best recommendations, I want to let you know that I'm giving you recommendations based off of how to get this thing corrected, not just make you feel better temporarily. Now watch the next part. From what you told me yesterday, now this is why getting the proper information on day one is so important, is because you're not telling them anything about your opinions, your stance, your philosophy, your anything. You're telling them what they told you yesterday. John, you told me yesterday that you've tried the MD, the PT, acupuncture, and you told me nothing you've done so far has actually gotten this problem corrected. Is that right? What is John going to say? No, I don't remember. He remembers. Yes, I did tell you that. Got it. So I want to make sure that we got to do something different so that you don't continue going through all these other people to get this thing corrected. Does that make sense? Yes. Again, using what they said prior in order for you to build a case that you have the answer to their problem, because you do. But in order for us to get this problem corrected, in order for us to get this problem, give a solution to this problem, you need to do this, John. So that's why I'm going to see you 3 times a week for the next 3 months. Minimum. I love adding that minimum because your recommendations are your recommendations. Your fees are your fees. And if you go into it managing their expectations, it's so much easier for you to recommend what you want to recommend. So many of you come out with finances and care plans like you take a hammer and you bop them over the head. You came out of nowhere. You startled them. You surprised. Boo! Here I am. Recommendations. Boo! Finances. Boo! Why do we have to scare them with this? Pre-frame it. I'm going to give you my recommendations, but before that, I want to let you know my recommendations are based on how to get this thing corrected, John, not just make you feel better temporarily, okay? You told me yesterday you've tried all these things to get this thing corrected. It hasn't. You also told me that this thing's been bothering you for, 15, 20 years already? So I think it's about time that we do something different in order for this to get corrected. So, John, I'm going to see you 3 times a week for the next 3 months. Minimum. That's it. That's all it sounds like. And I do this almost every single day, and I do it without even thinking about it. But frankly, if we position the why behind the what, and we've heard that a million times before, right? But we position why we're giving the recommendations as opposed to just giving the recommendations. So critical. If you try that, and if you have a little bit of bravery to do this with your next patients, and I just want to summarize so far. Number 1, we talked about timelining, right? We talked about getting them to tell you when they first had this problem to any degree whatsoever, right? We also talked about what they've done to get this problem corrected. This was all on day 1 stuff. On day 2, we talked about how to present your recommendations, your real recommendations, not your kind of recommendations or recommendations you know that are not truly what they need. And lastly, we're going to get into the finances. How do we tie this all together and get the finances into this conversation for ultimate correction for a problem that they've had for 25, 30 years? And just me saying this, doesn't it sound so easy now? Like, yeah, the finances, we got to go over the money. Yeah, that's exactly how it's treated. Layup. No problem. We'll deal with the money because they are in at this point. They're ready to go. Now they just got to figure out a way to get that done. And the finances, yeah, we got to discuss that because people screw it up all the time. And let's go into finances right now. I want to let everyone know that finances is probably the easiest part of this whole process. If you know what you're doing from a day one, day two, you ask the right questions, you get them up a ladder, you don't make the fatal errors that a lot of people make. And if you did everything correctly, okay, even if you didn't do everything correctly, if you did most of it correctly, what will happen is the finances just become a matter of fact. One of the things that you all have to understand is that patients expect a conversation about finances. And I don't know if you all know this, but when a typical chiropractor is scared to address the finances, that's the stuff that makes you look very suspicious, makes you very untrustworthy, and makes patients question whether or not you are someone that can help them with this problem. Now, how do I know this? Because as a consumer, someone who buys stuff all the time, and you are all consumers before you were salespeople for chiropractic. And as a consumer, let me ask you, if someone who's selling you something is not forthright and direct and confident and certain about how you're supposed to pay for something, doesn't that make you wonder? Yes, it does. When the salesperson that's selling you something isn't organized and hasn't planned out how you're supposed to pay for a car, how you're supposed to pay for a house, how you're supposed to pay for whatever, doesn't that make you less confident that this person can actually do the job? Yes. You see, when it comes to sales and closing, how we all figured this out is by truly trying to understand what makes ourselves, what makes us buy something effectively and efficiently without asking too many questions and being happy about it. And if you ever have any doubts on what people or what is the right thing, you always have to ask yourself, if I was the customer and if I was the patient, how would I feel about it? It's a little harder to do than it sounds, but it's certainly an exercise or something that you should be consistently be working on as a skill set. So back to finances. You need to plan this out. Before the patient even comes in for the second visit, which is the report of findings and the recommendations and the finances, you need to plan this out. So if it's a cash case, no insurance, no third party, just this is what it is. I don't really care what you charge or at this point. I want you to know exactly what you charge, okay? You need to know your numbers. Why? Because when you talk numbers with patients, it needs to be confident, direct, and certain. There is no weird feelings about these numbers. You need to be sure about it. You don't want to be like, I don't know if these are right numbers. And if you don't know if your numbers are right, that's when you use your colleagues in the profession to talk this out, right? And after this presentation, please email me or join our group and let us know, hey, these are my numbers. What do you think? And we have 2,000 people in this group that will be more than happy to tell you, hey, I like this, I like that. But you work that out with your colleagues within your profession, right? Before you present it to your patients. What I don't want you to do is get to the finances and try to wing it and figure it out on the fly. No one's that good. You need to be prepared, planned. So the other consideration with finance is that we commonly, because we're anxious about it, and because we're unsure, we inherently make the finances very complicated. The best financial conversations are super, super simple. I mean, really, really simple. So I'll show you guys how I do it. And then there's a couple of variations. But nevertheless, like finances, it's totally up to you. You charge what you want to charge. Now, how you present it, there's a couple of rules that we must follow. Number one, simple. We want to narrow this down so that your patients have two choices, maybe three, but two choices. Okay? You may think giving people less choice makes it harder. Actually, it's the opposite. Giving people less choices makes it easier. Why? Because people are tired, man. They've had to make so many complex decisions in their own lives with their friends and their family and their own businesses or their own work that when they're presented with a decision, they love it when people make it simple for them. Why? Because it's easy. And people love easy. I don't care where you are in this world. They love easy. So let's make it easy. So we are going to prepare the finances. So let's assume it's 24 visits, okay? And let's say, I'm not saying these are your fees. I'm just saying this for an example. Let's say your 24 visit care plan is $2,000. Let's just say $2,000 US. Wherever you're watching this, it may be a different currency. $2,000 US. So let's say that's how much it costs. I'm going to give them two options. And these options are up to you, okay? I like the option of a prepay, and then I also like the option of a break it up into two payments, two options. So I'm going to make it easy for them. So this is what I would say. John, the total cost of care is $2,000. I get a lot of patients around here that come, 3 times a week, so I try to make it easy for them. So I give you the incentive to take this and break it up over 2 payments. If you do, I take off 15%. That brings it down to $1,700. You could take that and break it up into 2 payments, and then you're done. But a lot of our patients want to take care of it all at once. If you do that, I give you a 25% courtesy. That brings it down to $1,500 for a one-time payment. So between the 2-time payment and a one-time payment, which way works best for you? Yes, and then STFU. What does that stand for? Yeah, you remember. Let's shut the fuck up. Don't say anything. You present the 2 simple choices and then be quiet. And they will say something. Oftentimes, you interrupt them. Why? They're trying to figure it out. Okay, how much is it? $1,750. Okay, I'm going to have to figure this out. And then we interrupt them. So don't interrupt them. STFU. Every time I teach that, and I used to teach it live, I look at the audience and I look at their faces, and the faces are like, that was too easy. It's too simple to work is what most people are thinking. And I got to tell you something, and you could ask any of the thousands of doctors that we have trained on this over the last 12 years, and they will all tell you it is that simple. That we make the finances too much of a thing that creates so much uncertainty on behalf of the patients, where they have to go home and think about it, where they don't want to do it, or it's something of, or they tell you, the patients say, something in my gut told me that it wasn't right. And it's the over-explanation of the finances that kill the financial presentation in most of the chiropractors that are struggling with selling, pushing, and closing chiropractic. When it comes to sales, it's not so much what you're not saying, it's what you're saying that's blowing it. And so most of the conversation in a lot of sales training for chiropractic is, don't say something. Refrain from saying certain things. If your day 1 is taking more than 15 minutes, we have a problem. If your day 2s are taking more than 30 minutes, we have a problem. What are we talking about? And what possibly could we be saying to our patients that we think is helping the close? In actuality, we just talk ourselves out of the close. So in closing, if there's one thing I want everyone to leave here knowing is sales is a thing. And thank God that someone came along and said, hey, let's take this thing called sales that every other industry in this world understands and applies, and let's apply it to chiropractic. And that's what we've done. Only for chiropractic. If you want to learn more about this stuff, it's really not that hard. Just hang out with us. You don't have to do our course yet. Just hang out with us. You can hang out with us on Facebook, www.facebook.com/Closers Club for Chiros. I'll put the link down here. You can also visit our website, www.closeforchiro.com. And by the time you hear this, registration will be closed for our Masterclass 2.0, but we will be opening up a new class in January, hopefully. So if you want in on the first class of 2021, click this link, which is our booking link. I'll put it down below, and you guys can book a call so that we can get you into that class starting in January. So it has been an honor and a pleasure hanging out with you all today. I hope you use a lot of the things that I've taught you to do I didn't want this to be just a headspace talk. I just wanted to give you real deal, things that you can implement in your practices literally tomorrow, because the world needs us. The world needs chiropractic, and I know that for a fact. Unfortunately, we're just shooting ourselves in our foot, and it's about time we change that, because it's just too important and there's just too much at risk. So if you enjoy this half as much as I have, that means I enjoyed this twice as much. Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure speaking to you today. Again, this is yours truly, Dr. Dan, CloseForChiro, where we show you all how to get the yes with less stress. Take care. Have a great day.